Hello everyone. Welcome to another Saturday Secrets of Eventide stream. I am Jason Bullman. I am the creator of Eventide and the creator of the Pathfinder role-playing game. And today, we're going to build a monster. Yeah, I figured we could do that. That'd be fun. I've got, Wolfren's Fate is a fun adventure, and it's coming along nicely. But one thing that new adventures need are new threats, new adversaries, new fun toys for the GM to play with. It's not all just for players. So, here in today's Secrets of Eventide stream, I thought what I might do is walk you through the monster creation process for Pathfinder 2e. If you have the Game Mastery Guide, you're going to want to turn to page 56. That's going to be the place you're going to want to be. That's where all the charts and tables are, and that's going to help you out, because I'm not going to walk you through every individual little step, but I'll show you how I jump around and work to create a monster. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for stopping by. Tuck yourselves in. We're going to make a monster here today that is going to appear in Wolfren's Fate. So that you can follow along, I've created a couple little handy things here. First of all, let's talk about the monster that we're creating. Today, we are going to create the basic stat blocks for the Gaunt. That's right, the Gaunt. This is the new monster that appears in Part 2 of Wolfren's Fate. It's a creepy kind of dude that stalks you from the shadows, reaches out from the dark places, and grabs you. He is a spooky monster, and he is the central foe at the end of Part 2 of Wolfren's Fate. So, spoilers. Yeah, don't. If you're planning on playing this, you probably you want to hit that back button right about now. Okay, so we're going to be working on that. I'm also going to go ahead and bring up a Word document here. This is just a basic Word document, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this in a little so that it's a little easier for folks to read. There we go. My green screen's being a little problematic, but we'll just have to cope with that. Not perfect here today. Must be something to do with the lighting. So this is just a blank stat block. So this is going to be the Gaunt. And that's what we're going to be creating here today is the Gaunt stat block. Now, these creatures are tied intrinsically to shadow and darkness. They are in the adventure. They're lurking in the sewers, and they're trying to thwart the PC's progress on learning more about Wolfren. They are, in fact, the ones who had Greyfawn Nimblebrow killed in Part 1, and they have now set their sights upon the PCs. So, this is not a super tough creature, and it's, in fact, going to be the start of an entire family of creatures. But this is the basic one. This is the kind of least one. Now, that said, despite the fact that it is kind of the least among them, I do want it to be a serious threat, a serious adversary, that if faced in multiples at the player's current level, which is 2, they could be a very deadly threat, which means their level needs to be probably 1 or 2. I'm currently kind of waffling between the 2, because later on what I'd like to be able to do is use them as kind of mooks, just kind of easy to thwart bad guys that I can throw at the party en masse. Now, there's a big difference between 1 and 2 on that front, because 2 has a bit more survivability. Level 1 creatures, frankly, just die in a snap. So I'm thinking level 2 is the way to go here. Now, that means that at the end of this, if I throw more than 1 at the PCs, it's going to be a very serious fight. But that said, I think they can handle it. I think they've got their wits about them. So let's go ahead and set this guy at level 2. We'll go ahead and change this to Gaunt. Now, this is just a blank stat block. It doesn't have all the formatting that I would normally do or that sort of stuff. Normally all the line breaks and things start appearing in here. But this is just the basic version of a stat block with all the kind of basic spots in it. So let's start with some things that we don't really need charts for. First of all, alignment on this guy is pretty straightforward. He is chaotic evil. Size on this, he is medium. So pretty simple there. Now, when it comes to traits, we don't need to go too deep on this, and we can always come back and add more later. But one thing that I know for certain that this guy has is the Shade trait. He is a creature of shade and darkness and shadow and negative energy, so he gets the Shade trait automatically. Okay, so let's take a look at the character creation rules. Now, these, I am actually, let me make sure these follow the same pattern. Yeah, they roughly do. Okay. So I'm actually working off the old PDF, which is what we use to create the guidelines in the GMG. So if things don't perfectly line up, that's probably why. So we're going to start out here with ability modifiers. We're going to jump down to those and fill those in and figure out what we got here. So for a level 2 creature, looking at the table... No, I might as well just go over to the GMG. So this is table 2-1. A level 2 creature, the extreme end on their ability scores is a +5. The low end is a +1. High is 4. Moderate is 3. 2 is somewhere in between. So here's the thing. I am thinking that these creatures aren't about strength and brawn. I mean, just kind of look at it, right? Art-wise, that's not a brawny creature. That's a pretty thin, nimble, agile creature. So I'm thinking Dex is the big stat here. So we're going to go ahead and give it a +4 in Dex right away. But that said, I don't want it to be a slouch on strength. I just don't want strength to be its big thing. So we're only going to give it a 2 there. Con, I do want these things to be kind of hardy. But that said, remember, when you're creating stats in Pathfinder 2, they're not as critical. The stats should influence the numbers that come after, but there's no hard and fast formulas. So I'm just going to go 3 here. That's kind of moderate for this level. These things are smart. I'm going to go 3 on int. Wisdom, I'm going to go... actually, you know what? I'm going to bring the int down. I don't think they're super smart. That may not be their thing. I'm going to go ahead and take that down to a 2. Wisdom, I'm going to keep it a 2. Oh, that's bold for some reason. Why are you bold? You don't need to be bold. All right, and then Charisma, I'm actually going to put kind of up because they have an incredibly strong force of personality, and that's going to play out in their skills. So I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a higher Charisma. We'll go ahead and give him a +3. Let's start with 3. Okay. So, everything is within range there. I might even take int down to 1. Just to give it some variability. Again, these aren't super critical skills, but they are a part of the creature's kind of building blocks. Okay, so that's kind of ability modifiers. If you get to table 2-2, the next table is its perception. Now, perception here for second level creature goes from roughly 5 to 11. So what I like to do, personally, is just kind of figure out where the baseline might be. So it's a second level creature. It's definitely at least trained in perception, so that's another 2. So now we're at 4. And it has a wisdom of 2. So the minimum I could give it that would make sense would be a 6. But I think this guy's pretty perceptive, so let's give him an 8. And what that is, basically it means that he is an expert at perception if you needed to boil it out. You don't, but for the purposes of kind of making the creature feel logically consistent, let's do that. Not built on the same system, but doesn't need to flaunt the system either. So a +8 puts it right in the moderate range for a second level creature, which is fine. Senses, it definitely has dark vision. Definitely. It might even have greater dark vision. That might even make more sense here. Greater dark vision being it can see through kind of the deeper super darkness. So let's go ahead and pencil that in for now, and we'll give that some thought. We'll let that kind of roll around and see whether or not that makes sense long term. Because let me go ahead and look up greater dark vision. So greater dark vision can see through magical darkness. So that does make sense for this creature. So we're going to go ahead and keep that. I think this guy deserves greater dark vision. That kind of fits the theme. You can't beat this guy with darkness. It would make very little sense if you could beat him with darkness. Now let's talk. Let's see. From perception, we're going to go on to table 2-3, and that is skills. Now, skills are going to run the gamut anywhere from the extreme level is an 11. Low level is about 4-ish. So we're looking 4 to 11 with high being 8, moderate being 7 or 6. Something like that. It's not set in stone, but you want something in that range for it to be competent. Yeah. Yeah, I got news for you. As I create creatures, I oftentimes look things up. Because even though I helped make this game, a lot of things changed over time, a lot of things shifted and moved around, and it is good, I think, to just double check. Doesn't hurt. You can easily do a search on your favorite search engine and find something in Archives of Nethys that's going to clear things up for you pretty quickly. So I think that makes life super simple. So let's talk about skills here. Can have a couple skills. I know there are some skills it definitely needs to have. So let me just go in and fill in the skills that I know it needs to have right off the bat. I think it needs acrobatics. I think that's important. In addition to acrobatics, I think it's going to need deception. Because this is a creature that blends in and hides. To that end, obviously, it's going to need stealth, but we're not quite there yet. It's going to need intimidation. I think it scares people via intimidation and causes them to kind of panic. It's obviously going to need occultism because that is its whole shtick, is it is an occult creature. It's going to need stealth, and it's going to need thievery. Because it can slip into places and do thievery sorts of things. So, that's a lot of skills. And I need to spell intimidation right. Okay. So, that's a lot of skills for a monster. That's generally a bit more than I would generally put on a creature. But I think for this creature, it does make sense. This is a big plot creature. It needs skills to be able to do the things that it needs to do. So, again, I like to look at skills from the angle of what would its base math be, assuming it was trained, expert. Let's try and figure out something along those lines to see whether or not we got anything that fits. So it is kind of roguey. That's the point, right? It blends in, it hides. It's like the concept for this creature is kind of the boogeyman that hides in plain sight. You look across the crowd and you see a whole bunch of creatures or people, and then you suddenly notice that something's not right with one of them, and it's a gaunt, right? They can hide in the middle of a group of people, and you don't notice them. You, like, scan through it, and then you're like, wait, what the hell is that thing? And when you look back, it's gone, right? And they're there to be kind of that creepy stalking you in plain sight or in the shadows. They've got a bit of Slenderman to them in the kind of like, if you're walking down an empty city, an empty town at night, and you walk past a street heading away from you, you might see them in the distance just standing in the darkness, watching you. And then when you turn back to look for them, and they're gone. But we'll get to that. I've got some ideas about how to make that work. So let's nail down these skills here real quick. So the skills... we're talking about, let's see, let's do the dex skills first, and then we'll do the int skills and the charisma skills. Okay, so the dex skills are all going to have a minimum of 6. Or, sorry, 8. 8, right? Because trained is 2, creature is 2, and dex of 4 means their minimum is going to be an 8. So that puts them at high already. So I don't need to go too crazy with any of these. So I think having the acrobatics and the thievery at 8 already makes them incredibly strong in those categories. But I think stealth goes 1 tier higher. I think they have a stealth of +10. I think these things are incredibly good at disappearing and hiding from you and not being spotted. So I think that all makes sense. Now let's hop over to occultism, which I believe is my only int skill in here. Yeah, it's my only int skill because intimidation and deception are both charisma. Go ahead and zoom this out just. I can do that. Let's do that instead. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody can see everything. Okay, so yeah, I mean basically I decided it's an expert at stealth. None of that's spelled out, but it doesn't really matter. So let's go ahead and grab its occultism. Its occultism is going to be a minimum of 5. Now 5 for a second level creature is pretty low. So I'm going to assume that it's an expert at occultism. That doesn't give it a great score, but it does give it a 7, which is decent. We'll call that good. Now these last two, Deception and Intimidation are both going to be at a base of 7. I do want Deception up to be high, so I'm going to put Deception there. And Intimidation, I think we can probably keep at +7. So that's a pretty good skill package for this creature. As I said, a lot of skills. Perhaps more than are necessary, and I'll think about that as we go forward. But currently, I think all those are pretty necessary. Being able to pick locks, being able to hide, being able to kind of move around in fights and stuff, all kind of fits. Now, Table 2-4 talks about safe items you could give the creature. Being level 2, there really isn't anything you can give this creature that you need to give it. You'll notice I do have an items section down here. I don't really think this is a creature that relies on items. It doesn't pull out a knife. It may have daggers it can throw at you, but if it does, they'll be daggers made of shadow, and it won't actually throw real knives at you, because it doesn't leave any trail behind. So let's skip that. Let's now go to its defensive abilities. We're talking about armor class and saving throws here. Armor class is going to range from 21 to 15, and saves are going to be roughly 11 to 5. Anything outside that range is going to be no good. So let's see if we can figure that out. Bring this down a little. Okay, so armor class, its minimum armor class is going to be an 18 based on its level, being trained, and its dex. So an 18 already puts it at high. I don't have a problem with this creature having a high AC. That kind of tracks for what I want it to be. I want it to be kind of a little higher on the AC front and a little low on the hit point front. So I want it to be a little harder to hit, but when you do manage to tag it, you can take it down a little faster. So at higher levels, what that's going to play out as is you will hit a point where you can just one-shot them. But it'll take a little bit to get that point. So let's go ahead here and let's just pencil in an 18. I like how I say pencil in. I'm working on a computer. So let's go ahead and pencil in an 18, and then let's take a look at its saves. I may come back and adjust that when we're thinking about hit points. So saves are going to be, yeah, like I said, 5 to 11. I'm just going to pencil in the minimums here. So that's going to be 4. It's going to be +7, +8, +6. So those are trained across the board. Obviously, I think it needs some things not at trained. It certainly needs its reflex up at expert. So we'll go ahead and give it a reflex bonus of 10. And then, honestly, I think Fort is the area where I lag behind, and we'll go ahead and give it a will of +8. And I think those are pretty solid saves. 7 to 10 is well within tolerances for second level. The Fort save's a little low. The reflex save is on the high end, and will is perfectly average. So I think that's a pretty solid save package. Now let's go ahead and hop down here to hit points. So hit points, generally speaking, when you're building out hit points for a creature, this is also when you want to take into account any weaknesses, immunities, or resistances it might have. I don't know that this creature has any of that. I don't know that this creature is necessarily resistant or anything like that. I kind of played around with the concept that it's like got leathery, durable skin that might prevent some forms of damage, but I'm not sure it needs that. I think you can emulate that with more hit points if you want. You don't have to necessarily give it a resistance to damage or anything like that. And frankly, it's not like the creature's inherent physiology really lends itself in any direction. So for hit points, the high band is around 35 to 40. The moderate band is about 28 to 32. And the low band is 21 to 25. I don't think necessarily that going all the way to the low band is warranted just because I gave it kind of high AC. I think I can still sit in the moderate band, but I may want to sit mid or low in the moderate band. So you know what? I'm just going to pencil. I'm just going to put down 30. That's right in the middle. Not too high, not too low. And the AC isn't outrageously high. To be clear, The moderate AC is 17, high is 18. So, had I gone 19 or even 20 on this guy's AC, I definitely would have wanted to bring those hit points down a bit. But I think being at 18, I can keep it kind of nice and in the moderate zone, and I don't really have too much of a problem with it. Let's think. Does it have any resistances or immunities? It has one immunity that I know it has, and that's negative. Doesn't take negative damage. Harms and things like that do not hurt this creature. Those things just do not work on a gaunt. There's reasons for that, but I'm not going to get fully into them. But suffice to say, that's where that is. So for the time being, I'm gonna leave these blank. I'll just pull them off. They don't need to be there. All right. Now, I'm getting into kind of this later stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and delete items because I don't believe it carries things. It doesn't necessarily carry automatic like weapons or armor that you can loot off of it. It may have magic. An individual gaunt may have things, but as a baseline, they don't. Let's play around with that. Yeah, there may be a light weakness that comes in, but I'd wanna investigate that a bit more. So I could give them, light. I think there's what is light vulnerability, light sensitivity. So I could go ahead and give it light sensitivity. That does kind of make sense, actually. So if I did go in here and go ahead and give it light sensitivity, that does kind of follow. Light blindness, maybe harsher than I want them to have. Let's stick with light sensitivity for now. They're creatures of shadow, not creatures of pure darkness, if that makes sense. There's a fine line in here that is like, they dislike the light, but you need light to have shadow. So they're not totally against light, but in bright light, they really don't like it. So, that's where light sensitivity. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to think about that a little bit. We'll leave light sensitivity in there for now, but we'll give that some thought. Okay. Let's continue working our way through the various statistics. Immunities and resistances, yeah, we kind of talked about those. So we're getting into speeds and strikes. Let's talk speed here real quick. I think these things have kind of a baseline average humanoid speed. I might be willing to give them as high as 30 to make them kind of creepily fast. But I wouldn't go higher than that. I think making them, maybe 30 is about as high as I would go. I'm going to give him some offensive abilities here that might change some of this stuff up as well. Currently, I have the defensive abilities still in there. I'm not sure if they're getting any of those. I'm still kind of mulling that over, and it may come into how the abilities package comes together. Because one of the things about, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is you get a bunch of abilities, right, on a creature. Some are offense, some are defense. Some kind of straddle that line of like, being able to move around a whole bunch. Is that an offensive ability or a defensive ability? It's an offensive because it comes after speed. Right? You want those things bundled that way, but we'll worry about that then. Let's talk about strikes. So this is where we're getting into some of the complicated stuff. So if you haven't noticed, this creature's kind of roguey. So I think it's probably going to have sneak attack. That means if I'm giving it sneak attack, that means it has the possibility for high burst damage. And if it has the ability for high burst damage, that means its base damage needs to be a little on the low side. But its accuracy can be pretty decent. So, let's play around with that. So, we're going to go claw, because its creepy long fingers will count as a claw. We're going to go ahead and put in finesse. And I think we're going to give it agile as well. Because it doesn't strike me as the kind of creature that's going to have a bite or other weird secondary attacks. I think it just makes claw attacks. I do think I might give it kind of a shadow dagger attack, where it can, like, whip shadow daggers at you. But these are kind of lesser abilities. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Let me take a peek at a thing here. We'll give it slightly better range than regular dagger, because they're made of shadow and it can throw them. So, we'll play around with that. Okay. So, let's go ahead and take a look at the claw here. Strike bonuses shouldn't be... 11 is on the high end. 7 is low. If we're making this agile, the base is going to be 8. That puts it slightly below moderate. I think as its primary attack, though, we go ahead and bump this up and we give it a 10. That puts it right below high. That puts it right below high, which is a pretty good place to be. I don't know that I necessarily want it at or above high, but 10 feels right. Better than moderate, not quite high. So, that's its claw, and damage-wise, so this is where we get into kind of interesting ranges here. So damage-wise, you know, extreme damage would be a d12 plus 4, and I'm just going to look at the average damages, because that's how I always play this. Average damages are 11, 9, 8, and then 6. So I probably want something closer to 8 or 6 if I'm going to throw sneak attack in there. And I'm only thinking for this guy because it's only level 2. It's only 1 die of sneak attack. So 1 die of sneak attack is going to count for about 3.5. So if I'm counting 3.5 in there and I want its burst damage to be high, the burst damage is 9. So if I take that down, I want its regular damage to be about 6. So there we go. That's what I'm shooting at. Which is, you know, honestly... that's pretty light. That's not a lot of damage. 1d6 plus 2 slashing is going to be about 5.5. Then you add in the 3.5 from sneak attack, and we're up at 9. So hitting you for 9 every hit is a little light. Little light. Letting that roll around here. Let's play around with the Shadow Dagger here. Same thing. I don't think this needs to be quite as accurate, but maybe it will be. It's going to end up with the same base of 8 as a minimum. So let's keep this at 10 as well. Keep forgetting I have the pluses in there. But I do think damage should definitely be lower, right? So we're talking 1d4 plus, you know, 2. And it probably will not be able to easily get sneak attack with it. So there's that. All right. So let's pop down to offensive abilities here, and let's go ahead and give it sneak attack. I'm not going to worry too much about the specific verbiage here right now, but I am just going to put down plus 1d6. I'll come around and finesse it later. This isn't the final stat block. This is me monkeying around with bits and pieces. Now let's talk about what makes this creature interesting. So here we got kind of a basic stat build out here. So we've got a creature that can sneak around. It needs some special abilities. That's the thing it's missing right now to really make it kind of pop and come together. It needs some special abilities. So let's get into those. I want to wrap this up at about 1:45, so we got about 10 minutes or so to play around with some of these. So first of all, I wanted to... so sneak attack is going to work great when you're dealing with multiples. But the problem is when it's by itself, it can't really use it very well without using feint, and that is complicated. So, I do want to give it an ability, and we're going to go ahead and just call it Terrifying Attack. The Gaunt... The Gaunt can add sneak attack damage on attacks made against frightened foes. That's it. It can scare you using Intimidate. And once you're scared, it can sneak attack you. So instead of having to go through the feint route, it can actually just frighten you. Now, I might want to give it an ability that just makes it scary. That allows it to kind of frighten you long-term or really mess with your head. So that is a possibility. It has an aura where maybe you can't reduce your frightened condition while you're near it. That could be interesting. Now, there's another thing I wanted to be able to do. Kind of a base. Now, there is something tricky in here, right? Technically, if I went the feint route, it has a better deception than it has intimidation. So actually, this ability right now, Terrifying Attack, isn't quite serving the function that I wanted to. But if I give it an aura that allows the fear aura to kind of stick around, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's someone in chat caught on to this as I was saying it. So I'm either going to have to consider allowing it to extend its fear aura in some meaningful way, or give it a terrifying aura. I'll think about that. But I want it to be able to sneak attack frightened foes instead of having to use the feint route. I think that might be interesting for this creature, that if you are afraid, it can hurt you more. I kind of like that as a thematic thing, even if currently mechanically that's not working quite the way I want it to. We'll get there. We'll get there. But here's another thing I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to be able to do that creepy thing that monsters in horror movies do, which is they're always in front of you or behind you. Like, they're behind you, then you turn the corner, and there they are. And how did they do that? Well, they ran real fast? I don't want it to run real fast. But I do want it to be able to, like, jump between places. So I'm going to give it an ability called Shadow Stalk. Now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go and make this a 2-action ability. And you'll notice that's not in the right... not the action symbols yet. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. I'm going to go ahead and change its font to Pathfinder Icons, which is the font we use to create the icon symbols. And it's still not quite there yet, but that's okay. What I need to do is go in and turn on ligatures for that section. Huh. Didn't that work? Oh, I know why. I didn't put the S in. You have to spell it exactly right. All right, so there we go. So all right, so the gun can travel between any two areas of dim light within 100 feet of its current location. It can only use this ability when unobserved. That's probably not tight rules language yet, but that's getting me to where I want to be. What I wanted to be able to do is hop between shadows. So you see it down an alley, you look back, all of a sudden it's gone. And instead, it's ahead of you now down the street because you're looking in the wrong direction. So there's that. I wanted to be able to hop between shadows. I think folks have clued into another ability I wanted to have, which is being able to blend into a crowd. It can disguise to do that. I can just give it some spells. And I may do that at some point in time here, but I'm trying to think about its bespoke abilities right now. If I give it some spell abilities, which I may very well do, it'll have things like Shadow and Disguise Self, or Disguise, and maybe Darkness, right? It'll have those sorts of things. But I do want an ability, and this is a defensive ability, that allows it to blend in. The Gaunt can, I'm thinking, so the Gaunt can use stealth to hide any crowd of 4 creatures or more, becoming indistinguishable from the creatures around it. So, what I'm trying to do here is, what I'm getting at is that it can basically go unobserved, without having to make a full check. It basically just blends in, and you don't really even notice it's there, unless it wants to be seen, or you beat its stealth check. So, again, I'm not fully set on the language of these just yet, but that's the intent. I'll come back through and tighten them up after. Nobody wants to see me sit here and tighten rules language. It's, frankly, pretty boring. But that is an important part of this, is going back through the abilities and being like, no, that doesn't quite mean what I wanted to say. But I'd rather get this monster kind of roughed out than leave some things kind of unsaid. Now, I am going to go down here, and I'm just going to make a note about spells. And again, I'm just going to add, I'm just going to write these down so that I don't forget them. I do think it needs Disguise. I think it needs Darkness. That's probably the only things it needs off the top of my head. I might give it some other interesting kind of abilities, but I don't want it to have too many. The spells really should be there to give it some story hooks and some story tools. They shouldn't be its major combat abilities. For that, it comes at you with its claws. Now, the only other thing that I think might be interesting on this is a kind of boo gotcha kind of ability. I think that's the last ability it kind of needs. That might just be something along the lines from I'm going to call it Jump from Shadow. I'm going to look for a better name, but we're not there yet. If the Gaunt starts combat unobserved on its turn, it may attack to demoralize all creatures within 30. So it may do the sort of thing when it jumps out, it just scares the hell out of everybody, giving them the frightened condition, right? Let me just double check this is working the way I think it's working. So if it jumps out to demoralize, yeah, they become frightened. So basically it's coming out and doing a boo. It jumps out and does boo. Now, whether or not I give it an ability that makes it harder, an aura to make it harder to get rid of the fear while it's nearby, I have to kind of consider one thing very carefully before I add something like that. If you can't get rid of the fear while it's nearby, in essence, all of its stats, numbers, all of its things are basically one higher. And that might push some of its things out of kind of the bounds of where I want them to be. It doesn't mean it needs to be bad when you're not frightened to be only average when you are frightened. There's kind of a delicate line there. But frightened affects everything. AC, attack rolls, it affects everything. So if it's frightening you and you can't get rid of that, that's going to make it really, really tough. Because all of its numbers are going to be one higher. So here we go. We've got the Gaunt. Obviously, there's a ton of work to do here. But in the past, 45 minutes, we've gone through, we've kind of filled out a bunch of its stats. That reminds me, let me go ahead and save. Let me tell you about the most important step of creating a monster. Save often. So here we've gone and given it a whole bunch of stats. We've kind of worked out a bunch of its details. We have an idea of what its abilities need to be. But again, we got a lot of stuff to fill out. We got to fill out a description. We got to fill out the basic kind of information and story about how it works. And we need to go back in on those abilities and kind of proof check some of them and kind of work them against the creature's overall narrative. So there you go. That's the start of the Gaunt. Now, this creature is going to be appearing in part 2. I believe the players are going to face the first one on the first night of Eventide, and then when they get down into its lair, there may be more than one of them. And they may have one of those irritating, annoying shadow hounds, hunters as well. So, it could be a very dangerous fight. But we will see how that all plays out. I do think that there's a lot of fun to be built here. And as I said, this is the first creature of a family of creatures. This is the most basic Gaunt. There are more powerful Gaunts. There are Gaunts that are far more creepy and terrifying than this one that can actually cast shadow spells and warp darkness around them and are surrounded by a supernatural gloom and can mess with your emotions and play on your fears and all that kind of stuff. Gonna be plenty of that. But this is just the base kind of rank and file soldier that the players are going to be the first one. This is going to be the first Gaunt the PCs run into. And may actually, in fact, be the only Gaunts the PCs run into as part of Wolfren's fate. The rest may appear later. But we'll see. We'll see. Alright, folks. That's all I have here for today. I've got another stream coming up here in just over 10 minutes, so I got to get everything set up for that. I want to thank you all for watching here today. This has been a lot of fun. I have certainly enjoyed this. I hope you have as well. The next Eventide stream will be this coming Tuesday. We'll be talking probably more about the upcoming bits of the adventure and where those are going. So make sure to tune in for that. That'll be at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. There'll be a link in the Patreon. Thank you for watching, everybody, and thank you again for all of your support. It really does mean a lot to me, and it really does make sure that this project continues moving forward, and I can't tell you how much that means to me. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thank you for supporting Eventide, and we will see you next time.